We began. Well, welcome. It is good to see all of you again on day 2 of the miraculous journey of Edward Tulane. I want to make sure that maybe you get to see him a little bit. Introduce our main character, Edward Tulane. And the beautiful thing about a main character is that we're going on a journey with him. We understand at this moment that this fabulous China doll cat, we've got a few things like about 3 feet tall with ears, hands and arms, legs, and feet, and head, all China. Remember, China is a fine porcelain, fancifully made. Do you remember who created Edward? Grandma Pellegrina, that's right. And the beautiful thing about the being in which we are following, it is a personification in figurative language perspective. It is the idea that this character has no ability to move or create its own power because it's a doll. But yet it has a mind, it has thoughts, it has considerations. It is taking advantage or thinking that life is just exactly as it always will be. Perfect. Being able to be recognized for Edward's amazement. And we are currently in his mistress's home, Abilene, where she lives with her father and mother. We have heard that terrible things happen to people who treat Edward wrong, such as the new hired housemaid who has put Edward away where he belongs. But where he is supposed to be, according to Abilene, is on a chair looking out the window with his gold watch showing that when the big hand is on the 12 and the small hand is on the 3, then she will return from school. The last time we were together, the family had just heard that they are going to be going on an incredible journey upon a ship. And Pellegrina, grandmother, will be staying at home. In our final scene, over and over and over again, before bedtime, Pellegrina comes in, tucks Abilene in, tucks Edward in with his open blue eyes, always just to pray, to watch the stars. And each night, do you remember what what Abilene asks her grandmother for? That's right, a story. And that story has been constantly put off until later, until tonight. The last thing that we read in the end of chapter 3, I want to make sure that we touch base on one more time so that you remember this, because it's really important to recall where you were before you move into what you don't know yet. And so today we are going to read from Pellegrina stating, that night when Abilene asked, as she did every night, if there would be a story, Pellegrina said, "Tonight, lady, there will be a story." Abilene sat up in bed. "I think that Edward needs to sit here with me," she said, "so that he can hear the story too." "I think that is best," said Pellegrina. "Yes, I think the rabbit must hear the story." Abilene picked Edward up, sat him next to her in bed, and arranged the covers around him. Then she said to Pellegrina, "We are ready now." "So," said Pellegrina, she coughed. And so the story begins with a princess. "A beautiful princess?" Abilene asked. "A very beautiful princess." "How beautiful?" "You must listen," said Pellegrina. "It is all in the story." Chapter 4. This, of course, will be Pellegrina telling the story. Once there was a princess who was very beautiful. She shone as bright as the stars on a moonless night. But what difference did it make that she was beautiful? None. No difference. "Why did it make no difference?" asked Abilene. "Because," said Pellegrina, "she was a princess who loved no one and cared nothing for love, even though there were many who loved her." At this point in her story, Pellegrina stopped and looked right at Edward. She stared deep into his painted-on eyes, and again, Edward felt a shiver grow through him. Interesting. A doll who can't move, but yet can shiver. "And so," said Pellegrina, still staring at Edward, "what happened to the princess?" said Abilene. "And so," said Pellegrina, turning back to Abilene, "the king, her father, said that the princess must marry, and soon after this a prince came from a neighboring kingdom, and he saw the princess and immediately loved her. He gave her a ring of pure gold. He placed it on her finger. He said these words to her, 'I love you.' But do you know what the princess did?" Abilene shook her head. "She swallowed that ring. She took it from her finger and swallowed it. She said, 'That is what I think of love.' And she ran from the prince. She left the castle and went deep into the woods. And so what?" said Abilene. "Oh, what happened then?" "And so the princess became lost in the woods. She wandered for many days. Finally, she came to a little hut, and she knocked on the door. She said, 'Let me in, I am cold.' There was no answer. She knocked again. She said, 'Let me in, I am hungry.' A terrible voice answered her. The voice said, 'Enter if you must.' The beautiful princess entered. A witch sitting at a table counting pieces of gold. 360 and 22, said the witch. 'I am lost,' said the beautiful princess. 'What of it?' said the witch. 3,060 and 23. 'I am hungry,' said the princess. 'Not my concern,' said the witch. 3,060 and 24. 'But I am a beautiful princess,' said the princess. 3,060 and 25, replied the witch. 'My father,' said the princess, 'he is a powerful king. You must help me or there will be consequences.' 'Consequences,' said the witch. She looked up from her gold. She stared at the princess. 'You dare talk to me of consequences? Very well, then. We will speak of consequences. Tell me the name of the one you love.' 'Love,' said the princess. She stamped her foot. 'Why, must everyone always speak of love?' 'Whom do you love?' said the witch. 'You must tell me the name.' 'I love no one,' said the princess proudly. 'You disappoint me,' said the witch. She raised her hand and said one word, 'For fury!' Oh, I have to show you the picture of Pellegrina and Abilene and Edward. Look at those eyes. Oh, Pellegrina, would you like her looking directly at you? I think I would too. And the beautiful princess was changed into a warthog. 'What have you done to me?' squealed the princess. 'Talk to me of consequences now, will you?' said the witch, and she went back to counting her pieces of gold. 3,060 and 26, said the witch, as the warthog princess ran from the hut and out again into the forest. The king's men were in the forest too, and what were they looking for? a beautiful princess, of course. And so, when they came upon an ugly warthog, they shot it immediately. Pow! That's called an onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeias are sounds that the word is spelled like. So like the word pow, P-O-W, right? Makes the sound of pow, or bang, or woof, or, well, pow. Now, were you a little bit troubled by the fact that a warthog just got shot by soldiers looking for a princess? No, said Abilene. Yes, said Pellegrina. The men took the warthog back to the castle, and the cook slid open its belly, and inside, the cook found a ring of pure gold. There were many hungry people in the castle that night, and all of them were waiting to be fed. So the cook put the ring on her finger and finished butchering the warthog. And the ring that the beautiful princess had swallowed shone on the cook's hand as she did her work. The end. The end, said Abilene indignantly. The end? Yes, said Pellegrina. The end. But it can't be. Why can't it be? Because it came too quickly. Because no one is living happily ever after, that's why. Ah, and so, Pellegrina nodded. She was quiet for a moment. But answer me this. How can a story end happily if there is no love? But, well, it's late, and you must go to sleep, darling. Pellegrina took Edward from Abilene. She put him in his bed and pulled the sheet up to his whiskers. She leaned close to him and whispered, "You disappoint me." After the old lady left, Edward lay in his small bed and stared up at the ceiling. The story, he thought, had been pointless, but then most stories were. He thought of the princess and how she had become a warthog. How gruesome, how grotesque, what a terrible fate. "Edward," said Abilene, "I love you. I don't care how old I get. I will always love you." Yes, yes, thought Edward. He continued to stare up at the ceiling. He was agitated for some reason that he could not name. He wished that Pellegrina had put him on his side so that he might look at the stars this evening. And then he remembered Pellegrina's description of the beautiful princess. She shone as bright as the stars on a moonless night. For some reason, Edward found comfort in these words, and he repeated them to himself. As bright as the stars on a moonless night. As bright as the stars on a moonless night. Over and over, until, at last, the first light of dawn appeared. Before we move on, why would Pellegrina tell such a terrible story? After weeks of waiting for a story, Abilene finally gets her story. And the story itself is quite harsh. Does it remind you of any characters in the story right now? What does Abilene say every night to Edward before she sleeps? "I love you." What does Edward do at the end? Let's see what happens now. Now, chapter 5 begins like this. Looks like they might be going on a trip. The house on Egypt Street became frantic with activity as the Tulane family prepared for their voyage to England. Edward possessed a small trunk, and Abilene packed it for him, filling it with his finest suits and several of his best hats and 3 pairs of shoes, all so that he might cut a fine figure in London. Before she placed each outfit in the trunk, she displayed it to him. "Do you like this shirt with the suit?" she asked him. "Or would you like to wear your black derby? You look very handsome in it. Shall we pack it?" And then, finally, on a bright Saturday morning in May, Edward and Abilene and Mr. and Mrs. Tulane were all on board the ship, standing at the railing. Pellegrina was on the dock. On her head, she wore a floppy hat strung around with flowers. She stared straight at Edward. Her dark eyes glowed. "Goodbye," Abilene shouted to her grandmother. "I love you." The ship pulled away from the dock. Pellegrino waved to Abilene. "Goodbye, lady," she called. "Goodbye." Edward felt something damp in his ears. Abilene's tears. He wished that she would not hold him so tight. To be clutched so fiercely often resulted in wrinkled clothing. Finally, all the people on land, including Pellegrina, disappeared. Edward, for one, was relieved to see the last of her. As it was to be expected, Edward Tulane exacted much attention on board the ship. "What a singular rabbit," said an elderly lady with 3 strings of pearls wrapped around her neck. She bent down to look more closely at Edward. "Thank you," said Abilene. Several little girls on board gave Edward deep glances full of longing. They asked Abilene if they might hold him. "No," said Abilene. "I'm afraid that he's not the kind of rabbit who likes to be held by strangers." 2 young boys, brothers, named Martin and Amos, took a particular interest in Edward. "What does he do?" said Martin, asking Abilene on their second day at sea. He pointed at Edward, who was sitting on a deck chair with his long legs stretched in front of him. "He doesn't do anything," said Abilene. "Does he wind up somewhere?" asked Amos. "No," said Abilene. "He does not wind up." "What's the point of him then?" said Martin. "The point is that he is Edward," said Abilene. "That's not much of a point," said Amos. "It's not," agreed Martin. And then, after a long, thoughtful pause, he said, "I wouldn't let anybody dress me like that." "Me neither," said Amos. "Do his clothes come off?" asked Martin. "Of course they do," said Abilene. "He has many different outfits. He has his own pajamas, too. They are made of silk." Edward, as usual, was disregarding the conversation. A breeze was blowing in off the sea, and the silk scarf wrapped around his neck billowed out behind him. On his head, he wore a straw boater. The rabbit was thinking that he must look quite dashing. It came as a total surprise to him when he was grabbed off the deck chair, and first his scarf, then his jacket, then pants were ripped from his body. Edward saw his pocket watch hit the deck of the ship and roll merrily toward Abilene's feet. "Look at him," said Martin. "He's even got underwear." He held Edward aloft so that Amos could see. "Take it off," shouted Amos. "No!" screamed Abilene. Martin removed Edward's underwear. Edward was paying close attention now. He was mortified. He was completely naked except for the hat on his head, and the other passengers on board the ship were looking at him, directing curious and embarrassed glances his way. "Give him to me," screamed Abilene. "He's mine." "No," said Amos to Martin. "Give him to me." He clapped his hands together and then held them open. "Toss him," he said. "Please," cried Abilene. "Don't throw him. He's made of china. He'll break." Martin threw Edward, and Edward sailed naked through the air. Only a moment ago, the rabbit had thought that being naked in front of a shipload of strangers was the worst thing that could happen to him. But he was wrong. It was much worse being tossed in the same naked state from the hands of one grubby, laughing boy to another. Amos caught Edward and held him up, displaying him triumphantly. "Throw him back," said Martin. Amos raised his arm, but just as he was getting ready to throw Edward, Abilene tackled him, shoving her head into his stomach and upsetting the boy's aim. So it was that Edward did not go flying back into the dirty hands of Martin. Instead, Edward Tulane went overboard. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. My goodness, the worst thing that could happen happened. He was naked in the air. Now he's going overboard without any clothes on. And he can't move. Oh, sorry. How does a China rabbit die? Can China rabbits drown? Is my hat still on my head? These were the questions that Edward asked himself as he went sailing out into the blue sea. The sun was high in the sky, and from what seemed to be a very long way away, Edward heard Abilene call his name. "Edward!" she shouted. "Come back!" Come back? Of all the ridiculous things to shout, thought Edward. As he tumbled, ears over tail, through the air, he managed to catch one glimpse of Abilene. She was standing on the deck of the ship, holding on to the railing with one hand. In her other hand was a lamp. No, it was a ball of fire. No, Edward realized it was his gold pocket watch that Abilene held in her hand. She was holding it up high, and it was reflecting the light of the sun. My pocket watch, he thought. I need that. And then Abilene disappeared from view, and the rabbit hit the water with such tremendous force that his hat blew off his head. That answers that question, thought Edward as he watched the hat dance away on the wind. And then he began to sink. He sank and sank and sank. He kept his eyes open the whole time, not because he was brave, but because he had no choice. His painted-on eyes witnessed water turning. My goodness, an old steamship. A ship. Years ago, and look at Edward. It almost looks like he has some concern. His painted-on eyes witnessed the blue water turning to green and then to blue again. They watched as it was as black as night. Edward went down and down and down. He said to himself, if I am going to drown, so I have done so by now. Far above him, the ocean liner, with Abilene aboard it, sailed blithely on, and the China finally on the ocean floor, face down, and there, with his head in the muck, he experienced his first true emotion. Edward Tulane was afraid. So Edward is now upon a journey in which he chose. What will happen? You think we can read one more? Yeah, I think so too. I don't know if I want to show this one to you, but chapter 7, waves crashing. Read. Makes me wonder. Kind of makes me think about surfing though too. Sorry. He told himself Abilene would come and find him. This, Edward thought, is much like waiting for Abilene to come home from school. I will pretend that I am in the house on Egypt Street, waiting for the little hand to move to the 3 and the big hand to land on the 12. If only I had I would know for sure. But it doesn't matter. She will be here soon, very soon. Hours passed, and days, and weeks, and months. Abilene did not come. Edward, anything better to do, began thinking. He thought about the stars. He remembered what they looked like from his bedroom window. What made them shine so brightly, he wondered. And were they still shining somewhere even though he could not see them? Never in my life, he thought, farther away from the stars than I am now. He considered, too, the fate of the beautiful princess who had become a warthog. Why a warthog? Because the ugly witch turned her into one, that's why. And then the rabbit thought about Pellegrina. He felt that he could not explain to himself that she was responsible for what had happened to him. It was almost as if it was she, and not the boys who had gone overboard. She was like the witch in the story. No, she was the witch in the story. True, she did not kill the warthog, but just the same, she was punishing him, although for what, he could not say. On the 207th day of Edward's ordeal, a storm came. The waves. The storm was so powerful that it led off the ocean floor and led him in a crazy, wild, and spinning dance. The water pummeled him and lifted him up and shoved him. Help, thought Edward. The storm, in its ferocity, actually flung him all the way out of the sea. The rabbit glimpsed for just a moment the light of an angry and bruised sky. The wind rushed through his ears. It sounded to him like Pellegrina. But before he had time to appreciate being above water, he was tossed back down into the depths, up and down, back. He went until the storm wore itself out, and Edward saw that he was beginning again his slow descent to the ocean floor. Oh, help! Help, he thought. I can't go back there. Help me! But still down, down, down. And then, suddenly, the great wide net of a fisherman reached out and grabbed the rabbit. The net lifted him higher, and it was an almost unbearable explosion of light, and Edward was back into the world, lying on the deck of a ship, surrounded by fish. "Hey, what's this?" said a voice. "Ain't no fish," said another voice. "That's for sure." The light was hard for Edward to see, but finally shapes appeared out of the light, and then faces, and Edward realized that he was looking up at two men, one young and one old. "Looks like some toy," said the grizzled old man. He bent and held him by his front paws, considering him. "Rabbit, I reckon. It's got whiskers. Rabbit, shape of rabbit ears, at least." "Yeah, sure, a rabbit toy," said the younger man, and he turned away. "I'll take it home to Ned. Let her fix it up and set it to rights. Give it to some child." The old man placed Edward carefully on a crate, positioning him sitting up and could look out at the sea. Edward appreciated the courtesy of this small gesture, but he was heartily sick of the ocean bit of fur left on his ears, and something filled his chest. What a wonderful feeling. He was glad to be alive. "Look at that rabbit," said the old one. "Look, enjoying the ride, don't it?" Yep," said the young man. In fact, Edward Tulane was so happy to be back among the living that he didn't take umbrage at being referred to as it. That was a great chapter. Let's do a little bit of review just to make sure. Yes, some of you are going to turn it off already, but here's the deal. Make sure that we've got a general idea of what has happened so far. Edward was given an opportunity to listen to a story. Pellegrina told this crazy story without a very happy ending and stated something about the fact that if love, there is no worth to a happy ending. Then the family packed up and headed out on a great cruise journey to London, and across the ocean as they headed, two boys, Edward, stripped him naked for that matter, played a little bit of keep away, right, from Abilene. Abilene, his gold watch fell onto the deck. She grabbed hold of it, and right at that same time, chucked Edward, and at that same moment, whoa, Abilene hit him in the stomach, and Edward went over. A very, very long time. Abilene never came back. And then, after a massive storm, Edward was picked up by a fisherman's net. And the old man said, "I'll give it back to Nellie. She'll make it right," and give it to a child. And at that moment, Edward experiences two major feelings. One, fear, right? He was afraid and alone. Got some time to think. When he got picked up, that's when he felt a bit of joy. Almost the fisherman could see the joy on a China doll's face. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. Set 2, right? The end of set 2. We are on chapter 8, starting tomorrow. Hopefully seeing you again. Thank you so very much for coming. I couldn't and wouldn't do this without you. I want to give a huge Oakley man who really kind of pushed this thing forward. I've got a couple other friends like Kate and Anya, a couple sisters joining us for this. Hi, this is their first time. Mag, it's good to see you too. It's really nice to see you again. And you who join us later, welcome. And I will look forward to seeing you a little bit more consistently. So we'll see you again tomorrow Friday. So we will be doing it at 11 o'clock, 11 a.m., like we always do on these Fridays when we do it. Well, until we see each other again, please stay safe. Please understand that you have so much, and have a great rest of your day. Adios, amigo.